I came to the Heritage Foundation today to make the conservative case for criminal justice reform, to discuss with you on our terms what's wrong with our criminal code and our penal system today, and to tell you what I think a conservative approach to policing and punishment ought to look like in the 21st century. Now, I realize that most people, including many conservatives, might think criminal justice reform is a progressive cause by its very nature, a progressive cause and not a conservative one. But this has never been true, and it's certainly not true today. The most successful criminal justice reformers in the 20th century advocated for what were ultimately, I believe, conservative goals. Law and order built on the responsible use of government's coercive powers, tight-knit communities, a vibrant civil society, strong, intact families, and personal responsibility. If there is one thought I can leave with you today, it's this. Criminal justice reform doesn't call on conservatives to compromise on our principles, but rather to fight for them. It's about making our communities, the little platoons of service and cooperation that are at the heart, really, of our great republic, making those safe and prosperous and happy. It's about basing our laws, our court procedures, and our prison systems on a clear-eyed understanding of human nature, of man's predilection towards sin, and also of his capacity for redemption, along with an uncompromising commitment to the dignity of the human soul. Respectfully for the equal dignity of all human life, no matter how small or how weak, and for the redemptive capacity of all sinners, no matter how calloused, is the foundation for everything that we as conservatives stand for. Our approach to policing and punishment should be no different. You see, the real problem today is not simply that penalties are too harsh or sentences are categorically too long, though in many cases they happen to be. The problem is that over the last several decades, we've industrialized and bureaucratized our criminal, judicial, and penal systems, which is to say that we've turned a blind eye. We've turned them into large, unaccountable, short-sighted, self-interested institutions that often treat offenders as statistical units rather than as individual human beings. We have a criminal code that's so big that no one knows how many crimes are on the books. Not even the Congressional Research Service. And this is their job. The Congressional Research Service pays people to find things like this out. It pays people to go out and figure out answers to questions like those. They cannot answer the question. An increasing number of these criminal offenses are written not by legislators at the state level, but by bureaucrats in Washington. And far too often they're written without even a mens rea requirement, leaving law-abiding citizens guilty of crimes without intending to do anything wrong. We have federal sentencing laws that too often prohibit judges from exercising their human and their legal judgment while they're imposing punishment for offenders. And we have a penal system that isolates offenders from the only people and the only responsibilities in their lives that have the power to facilitate true rehabilitation and bring about redemption. So it's no wonder that an estimated 3/4 of offenders released from prison every year tend to be rearrested within just 5 years. For conservatism to serve the whole nation, it has to serve the whole person and fight for everyone that Washington's broken status quo is leaving behind. Restoring equal opportunity to all Americans depends on reforming America's judicial, policing, and penal system on the basis of human dignity. That goes for the victims of crime and their families, who are too often cut out of the process, for the neighborhoods that are denied the most basic safety that most of us take for granted, for the families, especially for the young women and single moms who have to face every day without so many of their young men, whom they and their children and our entire society desperately need to live as husbands and fathers and anchors of their respective communities. And finally, for the perpetrators, who are, after all, no less human than the rest of us. Some crimes are so heinous and some criminals are simply so monstrous that the only responsible and fair use of the state's coercive powers is to prevent an offender from ever re-entering the society that he is so routinely or so violently, so thoroughly threatened. But the reality is that almost every offender who goes to prison will one day get out. We do ourselves a disservice when an offender's punishment does more to promote criminality than penitence. Forgiveness doesn't determine who is guilty or dictate what an offender's punishment should be. That's what police, juries, and judges are for. But real forgiveness also does not discriminate. As a matter of morality, I believe we're called not to forgive those who love us and forswear those who hurt us, but to accept that to be human is to be in need of forgiveness. And morality and religion aside, considered strictly as a matter of human nature and self-government, the pursuit of happiness depends on the opportunity to earn second chances. That's doubly true for Americans, trapped from youth in government-imposed dysfunction and inequality, who barely have one chance as it is. Treating our fellow citizens, our fellow passengers to the grave, as disposable is a price that's simply too high to pay for a society that truly believes that all lives matter. We know that no man is without sin. Now, we must remember in our hearts and in our laws that no man is without hope. This is why I'm involved, and this is why I'm here to invite you to join me in the conservative movement for criminal justice reform.